Lisa and Emily have volunteered to lead the discussion. I just want to remind you all that if you visit the Tuesday Topics page on the website, there's a direct link out where anybody who has Drexel credentials can watch the full videos. I have to admit, much of it has been on my to-do list as well. I've seen large chunks of many of them, but I haven't watched the whole series yet. So it's one of those things that I keep meaning to circle back around to. Thanks for the Creative Arts Therapy folks for showing up. Hooray!
Wouldn't happen
here. Go ahead, take it away.
Okay, cool. So we were looking at the episode, guys, and trying to find something that spoke to us for this week. And what we are going to watch some clips on and then have some reflection around is academic expectation based on race. And we're going to see kind of two perspectives, one being a student perspective, and then in the first set of clips, and that's from episode 5, if anyone wants to go back and watch the episodes after. And then also another clip, as long as we have time, from episode 9, that's actually from a faculty perspective. So we're gonna have a student perspective and then a faculty perspective based around the correlation between academics and race, and some stigmas and bias and things that kind of exist around those two topics. So we'll kick it off with 5. Okay, we'll watch a clip for 5 and then we'll chat a bit about 5.
Got it all queued up and hopefully everything will go.
Hopefully it's buffered, yeah. So this is from a student perspective. That's Jada, and this is going to be kind of from her perspective for this specific clip.
Jada's film, and then we're going to talk about it. Lights.
Okay.
My race was so brainwashed into thinking, oh, light is better, white is better. We grew up and started teaching our children that, oh,
perm your hair, use skin bleachers. I feel like it all associates from that time period, and now that's why we all have that certain mindset.
Don't you wish you had hair like this? Then the boys give you a kiss. Talk about
growing up, I've always seen white.
Oh. All I did was move the mouse.
It happened to me. Yeah, it might have to like restart it.
This is me when I was 4, waiting by a window for my dad. My dad, I go.
Should, like the time marker it should play. It's 39:18.
I thought it was important to memorize it.
It was good because obviously.
They seem to do just fine when you start at the beginning, but when you jump into the middle,
Right,
they
because
go
that's
wrong.
exactly what happened to me. And then I jumped and it was okay. Maybe refresh the whole thing.
This happened to me when I was watching yesterday too.
Yeah.
They found out that there is seismic activity on Mars. They're called Mars quakes because it's not Earth, but it's still
Really?
silly. Yeah.
Huh.
But it's because the planet is cooling, not because of tectonic plate shifting. Just thought a little tidbit out. Here's your science news for the day.
It's a good science.
2918. I feel like that's close enough.
It's just the funkiest room for all kinds of things.
Never saw people who looked like me.
I don't think you can define blackness with complexion. If you don't have that beige or sun-kissed skin, then you're not considered as beautiful.
They study because I only date mix. They're of a lighter complexion, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah, I think I am the perfect shade of brown for me, so.
Yeah, I really like my skin tone.
Okay. So comments for Jada. What did you think about the content?
The part I found most interesting is when you talked about like dating. Mm-hmm. And I know that some people in here have said they prefer not to date black people. So I was just wanting to know what they thought about it. Because like, I just want to know.
We need to actually call somebody out because they
I didn't say, I'm not pointing any fingers.
Hold on, everybody chill for a second.
We were talking about how having a racial preference when dating someone is inherently racist, and they would say, no, it's like liking someone with blonde hair, or, oh, it's like liking someone who's short.
They're saying that it's inherently racist, all right? All women are beautiful, right? Everyone's equal, all women are great, right?
All right. If you say so.
All right, but it's what you're into, right?
Right.
I thought it was odd because I've only ever heard they don't like to date black girls because they have more of an attitude and they speak up. I've never heard because of their dark skin. Huh?
No, I don't. No, I disagree. I was disagreeing.
Oh, I think sometimes people take things deeper than it really is, and you create an issue out of nothing. See, here's my thing.
No.
Everyone. I'm just gonna stop talking.
Well, I want to hear your opinion. She's got an opinion.
Wait, because every
Why are you looking at me like I didn't do anything?
You're Han over there. Go ahead.
Like, I think, like you said, dating to me, like.
That was like a minor part.
Yeah, but that wasn't
I know,
good. It's
but
okay.
I'm
She's
saying
okay.
It's about the complex.
I don't know, like, why you seem so upset. I'm just.
We shouldn't have asked people's opinions if we're being very honest.
Like,
Okay, so now y'all saying that I'm angry about it. I'm not angry about it. You speak. Go ahead.
Hold on a second. I'm going to address this right now. You have to understand something here. If you wanted to do a film for yourself, don't show it to anybody else. And just watch it yourself. I'm just telling you this.
Okay.
Like, you don't have to defend your project. You let your project speak for itself. And even if they go off on tangents, it still made them think about something. You're getting angry that people aren't getting something, but don't.
When you say angry, I'm not angry about
Okay,
it, Mr. Khan.
it seems angry or upset. That's what I'm saying. I think your film does a great job telling a story, and the people enjoyed that. So, anyways, thank you guys for watching. Hey, Jada, you can't get angry with me. You got to listen to what I'm trying to tell you here, because I'm not trying to make you upset. Let your film speak for itself, and it's a good film.
Do you think I should just do like one continuous shot from an angle and try like
All I ever wanted to do is to have some sort of impact in this world. Lift Black women's voices. Because oftentimes we are left out of the conversation.
Black girl, breathe in, breathe out.
Becoming a filmmaker is not going to be easy. I have to continue to work hard, try to be as authentic as I can.
Yes, there will be battles you sometimes lose. They never last for a day in your shoes, black girl.
Because what are we doing if we're not trying to, create change?
The heart of your poem, Daddy Tom.
Okay, so any initial thoughts about that clip?
I just want to lift her up and get her into Kerry Washington's filmmaking program, research program, or whatever. You know what I mean? I just want to be able to get her right in. Yeah, that's my first reaction. Come on, give her more wings to,
I mean, for her, it must be really hard to have people not get what she's understanding in her, because she's trying to express that and like just getting opposition. I don't know. It was like, I know she means well, but that made me feel bad for her. I don't know.
I wanted her to hush. I did.
Yeah.
Initially, that was I was just like, can you just be quiet?
Right.
But I think often, we've all been in her shoes where we felt like we needed to defend whatever our projects were or are, and that's just what kept bothering me. It was just okay, I feel like I've been there, just even from a student's perspective, and then a professional standpoint. I've been in both sides. okay, no, this is what I want you to understand. But at the same time, like when you're getting so much flack, you know, it just feels overwhelming, and the messaging, it just seems like your messaging wasn't received well, or you know what you were trying to communicate to them.
I wonder if the teacher could have prepped her
Mhm.
well, for that.
I feel like the teacher didn't prep the class.
Yeah.
Like I see someone who may see this academically, where all opinions are valid, regardless of what the material is, because we can look at it objectively. But those comments weren't even objective. Like, they're not talking about what they saw or what they didn't see. They're talking about like, oh, well, that's not my experience, so that can't be real.
Right.
And he didn't prep whatever the project was. Like, he must have known that this was a deeply personal, or like a personal point of view, a very specific point of view that he didn't understand. And so he didn't prep the class to give helpful feedback. The feedback isn't on the content. It's on helping her become a better filmmaker. And I think it's really easy for white and then men to treat everything like the way that they're treated, which is it's the baseline, it's academic. Of course you understand it because I understand it. When she was showing something that probably a lot of folks in that classroom couldn't understand. Yeah, I just, sorry to circle back, like my thesis statement is like, I'm actually like really frustrated with that teacher because it's not on her to be willing to accept criticism. It's on the teacher to prep and to help, to guide helpful, constructive criticism. And he didn't do that.
I think also this is, I mean, I'm a little biased as an artist, but I think with education in the arts and having made art so much throughout my life and understand the processes of art making, I think that when somebody comes into something that is an art, there is so much emotional attachment to it. And I think there's a learning process within that also of how to hold your art. And I think the teacher was trying to say that. But I think this is something that the art lends to in an educational process and in a learning process to kind of teach us how to connect with and weave through in a way that keeps our heart safe from the emotional component of it, as well as be receptive to other people's viewpoints of it.
I guess I'm wondering what the point of her showing the film was. Was it to get feedback on her film, or was it to provide a discussion for people? Right. And you know, we're making the assumption that it was to get feedback on the film, and maybe that's part of it. But like again, the teacher structuring it in a way like, okay, this part's going to be feedback about the film, this part's going to be discussion about the film. Yeah. Like to really be clear about the types of feedback that would be helpful to her, and also prep her, like you said, to sort of be like, now you might hear some things that you don't like to hear. Right. But you know, this isn't about you necessarily, even though it is about you. You know, this is about the work, and that's tricky. That's really tricky. I just remember in undergrad, like just how do you give feedback? And I know you've done a whole thing about corrective feedback as a therapy educator. Like, how do you give your students feedback in a way that helps them grow but doesn't make them feel like they're doing wrong? You know what I mean?
It's always hard to get, like whether it's good or bad. Right. Like because we do like a lab group in nutrition sciences, and every time I get feedback in my head, I get really nervous. I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Like I'm being tested and quizzed, and like I'm like, I don't like it. Whether it's good or bad, it's really hard to get it. But like when it's subjective things like this, it's a little harder, I think. But yeah, like preparing for that would be good. Yeah.
I think one thing I'm sitting with is at the end of the day, 2 young Black girls were silenced, you know, not seen. And that's, you know, however the intentions, that was this outcome, like something about how the interaction got managed, shut down both a filmmaker and, you know, there was the beginning of, you know, trying to have a kind of healthy disagreement. And, you know, just something about the space shut them both down. And it's just, you know, that's a hard takeaway from a moment. It's the point of this, that moments like that happen all the time. I also sat there thinking, what's it like for the gay kids in the room? It was a really heterocentric moment. Like the film was, the conversation was, and you know, you just wondered about who was hidden there too.
I can say something real quick. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So, this sort of reminds me, I don't know if anyone was at the white supremacy culture talk a couple weeks ago, but
I was.
yeah, so it reminds me of how there's this culture of certain people are allowed to be comfortable or uncomfortable, and in this case, it's the dominant culture. You know, don't make them feel uncomfortable, and also how you express yourself, like the emotions, like don't get emotional. It's who's allowed to have emotions, who's not allowed to have emotions. So I thought that really connected a lot to that talk on the white supremacy. And then also just sort of echoing what everyone's saying, I know whenever I expect that there might be some sort of very personal conversations or something like that in the classroom, the professor can give guidelines, but also the class can come together and say, okay, how do we have respectful conversations? Maybe they may not have known this would come up, but it seems like the professor should have known this would come up. And so how do we have respectful conversations? So if things sort of go off on disrespectful or stereotypes or, you know, emotionally charged things, you can come back to, okay, hey, we agreed that we would make this fact-based, or we agreed that we would respect even if we disagreed. So I think there's a lot that could have been done here, but yeah.
Something that was striking to me too as well was that on like the last 30 seconds maybe when they were panning the wall, and how most of the educators on that, whatever it said at the top, like wall of excellence, most of those educators were white men. And then I thought that was, I mean, good filmmaking, one, how they edited that over this happening with Jada, but also with her experience, I think that if she walks, or anyone really who is not a white male, walks into school and sees this wall of excellence and sees like, well, this is my example, and these are the people that are excellent, these are the people that are getting recognized, I would myself feel a bit of like a chip on my shoulder to then have to do more and like always prove myself and try to make excellent work and always try to like be on that wall and see what these people did and try to be better than that. And nobody told me I had to be better, but just by that imagery, I think I would feel like I wasn't good enough. And I think a lot of what Jada feels in general is that she always has to do more and feel like she always has to like, and so when she gets that feedback, it's very like where you were talking about protecting your heart earlier, like it's very hard for her because she feels very passionate about everything that she does. But I was drawing those correlating lines between what she sees on the wall with all the white men, you know, in honor on that wall, and then that will never be her experience. She's a person of color who's a woman, and then I'm a white female, and like all of those things. So like that will never, I can't be that, but how do I be that if that's what we're recognizing? And I think that's what some things that I would think as well, seeing that.
I think also just that when she's putting herself out there through this video and not being perceived not having the video be perceived the way that she had anticipated, or different interpretations, or people focusing in on things that she didn't find were as significant. And then when she became visibly upset, she did not want to be seen anymore. And so how that act of not seeing causes future issues with then those people who were not seen in the first place retreating and saying, no, you don't get to see me now. And how much we lose from not dialoguing that conversation properly in the first place, right? Not setting up that space of safety for people to express, and then how you know, the teacher was like, oh, you're angry. And she's like,
Yeah.
right. And then the whole stereotypes come in also
Yeah.
where that there's a perpetuation of that. And she's like, no, see now again, you're not seeing me properly. So it's just this cyclical pattern of not being seen and then not wanting to be seen and then not allowing to be seen.
Forced facilitation on his part. And I was actually headed into that prior to you saying that about the stereotypes of just Black women and Black men of being like angry. Like if you're, you know, you're receiving some type of whether constructive or, you know, bad feedback, like however you respond, whether it's, you know, non-verbally or verbally, like people, you know, tend to say, oh, you know, like classify you in this category as being this angry Black person. And I've been categorized as that. And it's not about, you know, me being angry. It's just protecting myself, but also like my work or whatever I'm, you know, doing.
I also, this poor teacher, sorry, sir. But I think it's also, it's something I think about a lot when I know I have made someone uncomfortable. It's this struggle of making my emotions not the centerpiece. And I observed that that's what happened at the end, where the class dismissed and he went to her. And although his words were to say like, you know, you have to be comfortable, you made a really good film, he's trying to soothe out the edges, because there's a, like, I perceive that there was a misstep. Like, he must know that there was a misstep there. He may not be able to put his finger on it. And so it just sort of saying what you were saying, like you could watch it happening, where she was just like, I'm done. She starts taking off her microphone. And I'm not an educator, so I really appreciate the challenge of walking that line of how do I respect what you're showing me? And what that student was showing was, I don't want to talk about this right now, and the insistence of still going and saying, I'm going to say these things to you. And it's hard for me not to think about all the times I've done that to soothe myself, to take care of myself, to make sure I know I'm a good person. And how that's because then it's just emotional labor that she has to do. No wonder she shut down. Like, she's like, I don't want to do your job now of taking care of you, so I'm just gonna leave.
Where did the conversation start? The conversation they're having about like guys not dating like people of color or something. Like, I guess I'm still trying to understand. Like, was it about the filmmaking or the
actual
topic?
For sure. What's the discussion about?
Well, I think it's the teacher let the conversation get way off the rails really early. And one girl made a comment saying that was the piece that resonated with me first, was that the people don't feel comfortable dating people of different complexions and different races. And then that sort of pinged around, and because I think Jada was feeling that her artistic work that she had put forward was being criticized and not, they were taking messages that she didn't put into it, and spending so much time and energy on that particular angle that wasn't about the whole piece. I think she, you know, it's a really nice piece that she put together. The conversation could have gone in lots of different directions. But the cringiest bit for me was when the instructor said, like, as soon as he recognized that she was getting upset, he identified it, he labeled it as angry, and then she started shutting down, and he kept sort of pushing towards that anger moment instead of saying, okay guys, we're gonna talk about this other bit about this about what we're seeing here. He didn't seem to have the pulse of the room to recognize that the conversation had gotten out of hand until it was over.
It was kind of bizarre. I was like, well, and then he mentioned that piece in general. He was like, when the student was calling individuals out, he's like, well, let's not call individuals out. But then he's like subsequently called Jada out and was like, if you can't take critique on your film, then like you like you basically saying you need to be able to take critique on your film. And it was odd because like that dynamic, like he almost used his power in that like room. Because it was, yeah, he did definitely use that power. I mean, many powers that he had standing up in that room, but even at a baseline, just that he was the professor, like by status, let's say he used that power immediately to then call a student out after he had tried to exemplify to the students to not call their peers out. So like that was an interesting dynamic as well that he flipped the room in.
You know, Leia earlier recalled the Tuesday topics 2 weeks ago on white supremacy, and one of the features is, you know, the privilege of sort of a right to feel more comfortable, you know, and I think in some ways he was exercising that white supremacy because you know, the temperature in the room was going up a little bit and he was getting uncomfortable, and he did these things to just like, you know, when the two students probably actually could have continued to communicate with each other had it been facilitated, and if he had been ready to really step into that. But he sort of, I think he felt like maybe the room was getting out of control and he had to put the lid on things, and that's, you know, what we learned, that, you know, part of white supremacy is sort of the privilege to put the lid on things, which silences, right, the people of color in the room. And that was, I just made that other connection. Yeah.
To queue up.
Do you want to shift over to a different scene, which sort of changes it from a here, I'll find it and you queue it up or tell them what set the stage.
Okay. Yeah, 9. Okay, so this, it's kind of actually a long segment, and I tried to like piece out the one that I thought was particularly poignant. But it's going, so this clip is actually now talking about the racial makeup of faculty at the school, and the lack of diversity on staff, different groups of staff at the school. And in particular, there's an interview with the AP history teacher, and he's going to share his experience about race when dealing with parents, and race when dealing with colleagues, and then how race is like personified in his classroom. And he's going to share like his own experience about that a bit.
Could you tell us the fact that you're the first black teacher?
I really don't want to say that. First black teacher.
You were the first black teacher in the city?
Are you probably on film now?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't want to relate to that. When I walk in the door in the morning to teach here at school, I don't think to myself, here's Janet Wells, the black teacher. I just feel, here's Janet Wells, the teacher. And I think that if I did not have that feeling and that belief and conviction, I couldn't function.
Why are there so few black teachers at this school?
The issue with attracting teachers of color, black teachers, Hispanic teachers in particular, is a national issue. If you can access a higher paying job and provide, a better or more affluent living situation for your family, you may or may not want to go into teaching. And I say that in a sense that there are some, actually, I don't want to go into that right now.
Even talk about?
Yeah, no, I need to think more about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was on one of the first committees to hire black teachers. I mean, division heads talked about this issue, going back 20 years, 15 years. We had brochures, we had teams. We went to job fairs. I think what people don't realize how hard it is to hire a minority teacher. And that's not to say I'm not letting anybody off the hook.
There are no black teachers in science department. You telling me you couldn't find one black teacher? That's not unique to Oak Park. You know, usually African Americans can teach gym. Yeah, in special ed.
We've painted African Americans as one-dimensional. That inability to get past the superficial has impacted the opportunities for many.
Today is a review day for us. So the title of this packet is A Gift to Help You Ace the AP Test. I asked the ladies down in printing to put a picture on this thing. And the picture was supposed to be me in a cape. Superhero teacher, same thing, right? You can decide how well they did on the picture. They didn't give me a cape, and they gave me a lot of hair. But I say it's funny, you know. I said, you know, kids are always making fun of my hair anyway.
The name Tyrone Williams as the AP history teacher, for some people, you know, conjures quite a few things. Some parents want to interview me to kind of see whether or not I have the intellectual chops and capable enough of dealing with their, you know, geniuses.
That's a long question. Have you had a lot of white parents take their kids out as soon as they find out you're a black teacher?
I don't know if that's why they take their kids out. I'll never know the answer to that question.
Is that your sense?
My sense is I'll never know the answer to that question. Yeah, you know.
When my black teachers teach their classes, I get a disproportionate number of parental complaints and requests for teacher changes, which is why carte blanche, I don't honor them. It constitutes, I think, white flight. You know, get me out of here isn't any different from get me out of this neighborhood. And, you know, what are the underlying beliefs that are driving that? Well, you know, I don't know. I know what's said to me, and it's never racialized. And yet, what's informing this if we haven't even actually met the teacher yet?
I'm happy to put my record up against anybody else's record in the AP class. My kids exceed the national average.
You know, I feel like people look at me and, you know, look at my image and look at my age, et cetera, and say, oh, yeah, you're good here. You know, you're like the black student whisperer or something like that.
When you're reading a story, when you're reading a body of text, no matter what the subject matter or content is, you're making inferences. You know, that's part of your skills in regards to reading comprehension.
You know, like on one hand, I'm valued, but I'm only valued to a certain extent.
When you get that reaction, how does that make you feel?
It hurts.
There are a lot of black parents who believe that black teachers aren't as good as white teachers. I've had experiences here I've never had anywhere else. You know, I had a black woman say to me, don't say nothing to my daughter. Just let the white man talk to her. I'm the only African-American woman teacher in my department. And every day I have to check my language to make sure that when I'm being transparent or authentic, that I'm not being too aggressive. Because then it becomes an issue of, oh, I don't like the tone in which you said those things.
So for this activity, you're gonna tell me societal stereotypes, both positive and negative, of each of the races. Ignorant, violent,
ghetto,
drug dealers. I have such a lack of agency in that building. It's hard because I feel so comfortable and powerful in my classroom. But there is no agency for making change if you are an educator in that building. I want to rephrase that. There's no agency if you are a woman of color educator in that building. Raise your hand if you would say that your t-shirt is a good representation of who you are. Nobody, right? But this is what we call the invisible t-shirt. I wear this, and I wear this everywhere that I go. And so I'm constantly battling the fact that I know that I'm compassionate and organized and I'm a helper, but people are seeing me as a stealer or poor or uneducated. And so what we need to do to overcome issues of race is we have to make the invisible visible. And how do I make sure that my real t-shirt, my real sense of self is showing through? Does that make sense?
Is an integrated community possible?
You want to know the truth? Now, no. Maybe 15 or 20 years from now, when whites are convinced that blacks are just as good as. I think we have to come to grips with ourselves personally and stop being afraid. There must be some way that people can live together here.
Initial thoughts?
I
Yeah,
just had to
the
take a
clip
breath.
was
Like, that was
powerful.
very
Like,
heavy.
yeah.
I'm trying to process this because I feel like these people of color, this Black woman, Black men, like that is me, you know, even though I'm not an educator, but oftentimes, like throughout my career trajectory, being put into this category, this little box of this is only what you can do. But it also dates back to like even before like my high school, like my educators that I had that were white women and white men, and the privilege and the power and authority that they had, and some of those messages that they communicated to me and my fellow peers that were Black, of like, you know, college being expensive and all these things that like make us not want to do it, to retreat, you know, and not think of ourselves as anything beyond what we are, like in those moments. So this is just really heavy for me, and I'm still like trying to process it. I don't know if I'm gonna be efficient in like communicating, because when I see these things, like it still like bothers me in a sense, like that we're still dealing with this. Like you know, just throughout my life, I've just, you know, I've heard like, okay, well, you know, we have to be twice as better, you know, or work twice as hard to, you know, get X, Y, and Z. And that alone is just heavy, like the complexities of all of this, like power, the privilege, the, you know, classifying people, you know, and putting them in these certain categories, or not looking at them as more than anyone else. Like it's a lot. It is.
You know, Kate, looking at the film and hearing you, I keep thinking about how our students of color, that even though this is high school, right, that this has very likely been experience of our Black students in particular, right, in this very country, and that our students are bringing with them all the way into grad school, right? Like college experiences didn't fix this, right? Probably kept going somehow, and that our students are bringing with them experiences, right? Like the weight of that is carried.
It makes me think about like even just like how it goes beyond that, because you know these are our lived experiences, you know, throughout grade school, and then we get to college and it doesn't fix it, but then how that transition into our professional lives. So I mean, me, for example, being the only Black person in our department, you know, and then it makes me think about roles. Like I know throughout my career, you know, I've applied for jobs and didn't get them for whatever reason, you know, but how I've heard, you know, people in just HR departments, you know, and where that whole, you know, questioning my degree also, you know, where I got it from. I got my undergraduate degree at HBCU. So were they competent enough to teach me and give me the resources, the skills to be competent in the workplace and have a role beyond, you know, what some people, you know, say the help, you know, you're only in a support role, you know?
When the teacher said, the work is making the invisible visible, for me, it's about white people dealing with the invisible being visible. Because what was so, I'm just like watching her do that exercise, but it's like, how many more generations do we have to ask people, Black and brown people, marginalized people, to prove their humanity and ask the culture to come with them instead of like it feels like the singularity, like I'm trying to imagine it but I can't quite. Like, what is that exercise that puts the work onto white people that says, I'm not going to prove my humanity to you because I don't have to anymore. You have to prove that you're willing to be uncomfortable for the rest of your life. And that doesn't make you a good person or a bad person, but you're going to do things that you're like, yep, I nailed it today. And you're going to do things that are like, nope, I got to do better tomorrow. But her saying that, just making the invisible visible, and how do we make white culture deal with that?
And also so much poignancy in the fact there was a clip from 1973 and this one said maybe in 20 years. And that was 20 years ago. And I'm like, what is going on? But what is going on?
I feel like that's what really struck me is that there's this belief that we're still asking for white people to say like, I have now decided you are good enough.
I see you. You're visible.
Yeah, instead of saying like, you want to know what, that approach has not worked. We tried that, didn't work because white people are still kind of terrible. The effort now needs to be like, in 20 years, white people need to be personally and professionally accountable. Like how are we raising people to be, how are we raising white people to be accountable in all settings for the power and privilege that they're born with, instead of asking this group of people to prove that they're good enough.
You figure it out.
Sure.
You know, for me it's funny because I didn't grow up in the US, but that's how it is everywhere too. It's not only here.
Yeah.
So for me it was like, okay, maybe I didn't have the same experience, but it was kind of like the same. My school was, so I was privileged in Honduras because I was in a bilingual school, private school. I was taught by Americans, all white people, all white, mostly, it was both males and females, but it was a little different, but it was always seeking approval from the white people. Obviously I feel it even more here, but like in Honduras, you always felt it, and it always, like, it was always like, yeah, white were always better. And so I don't know, it was just like, in the invisible, visible, like up here, it's a lot more work, obviously, because I don't know, it's different. Like in Honduras, everybody looks like me. So it's a little bit, it's not, but there's always a lot of too. So I don't know, but I was just pointing that out, that it's still like, even though it's a little bit less obvious, I guess, in Honduras, or maybe even more obvious, because it's like we put like white people on a pedestal, and so it's I don't know, I'm still taking that into something, but it's different than the same.
That pan from the first clip of the people on the wall being memorialized and set apart is really, that sort of imagery is everywhere. You know, you think about like in the uproar of certain white people taking down Confederate statuary. where I grew up. I'm from Northern Virginia. I grew up 20 minutes from the Bull Run battlefield where it started, and they, the highways in some of the schools are named for Confederate generals. Becoming aware of when that became a thing, the naming of schools as a reaction to the Brown versus Board of Education, was a somewhat recent revelation for me. So it's everywhere. It's pervasive, and it's hard to figure out how you can make sure that you're teaching our children to treat people equally.
And more than that, though, because I'm thinking about your question, Kristen, having kids in schools and having kids who've had teachers of color and white teachers and all different types of teachers, being able to treat people equally, but understand the difference as well. Like really talk to my kids about, when you're with your brown friends, they're going to be treated differently than you. How do you respond as a white person? And, using your privilege as a support, not to like overtake, but understand that. I distinctly remember talking to Noah when he and his friend Jihad would go out together, and Jihad had a car, Noah didn't, and Jihad would be driving, and I'm like, what happens? Because my kids are in Lower Merion. I'm like, what happens when the Lower Merion cops stop him? Because he's driving all black, and so we would have these discussions. And I think, I hope that I've instilled at least that process in my kids, that they question that stuff. They are white men. I mean, they will be white. My one is white now, one thinks he's a man. Wait, little white teenager. Little white boy. But like, I think it goes to like how the kids are, helping the kids have language for it and recognize it and understand things like, that they're named after Confederate general. How do you think that might make a black person feel? Or, noticing those things and even just pointing them out. But I mean, as an adult, I can do that. But it's a learning curve for me too. Like, I'm sure you didn't think that when you were a kid that was a bad thing, and I didn't either. Because that was not my upbringing. So it's a tough question, but I guess I have hope in kids being able to talk about this stuff.
But unfortunately, with all of the parents like you, there's parents like not you.
But I do think, I think that it has to start with us.
Yes.
Like we have to call each other out. It's surrendering that comfort. I think that like as a white woman, like comfort is my safety zone. Like that's where I'm not only like it's fucking patriarchy. Pardon my language. Sorry. This got so worked out. Like that's how they get you. Like it's the white supremacy.
Are you being an angry woman?
I was just
You're being hysterical. Calm down.
It's this white supremacy patriarchy where white supremacy is like, hey, the patriarchy is out to get you, but if you hide in comfort, it will keep you safe. And I'm like, oh, as a woman, I'm really scared. I need to feel safe, but I'm perpetuating this. And it's practicing on everyone I love when I see something and when I hear something, and it's saying, I'm gonna like take a deep breath and I'm gonna say, hey, I'm sorry, we need to stop this meeting. Like you can't, that phrase you used isn't appropriate. Or, hey mom, you really can't say, like, here's why you can't say that. I know that this can feel frustrating. I'm not scolding you. Like it's that because like our kids, and I say, I have a baby, so this is where all this anxiety is coming from. Thank you for all holding it for me. It's that no matter how hard I work and no matter how many people I surround her with, like there's TV, there's the internet, there's things that she is going to consume that are like embedded and encoded that if we're not overt all the time, those things are just going to build the foundation.
I'm always surprised at how many conversations I still have now, conversations for the first time with people about privilege. And then I wonder where in their life, like how were those conversations always avoided? And why were they avoided? Like, was it where they grew up? Was it where the people they were friends with? Was it their parents? Was it their school? Like, like people in like their late 20s for the first time ever having a conversation about privilege, to me, like that's an abstract to me, because I was having conversations about privilege when I was very young. And I went to a friend school, and like everything was incorporated because of that. And I grew up outside of Philadelphia, so it was a very like diverse community. My school was diverse, my friend group was diverse. Like it was all almost like this norm, like a norm to me, that we would be able to engage about like privilege and opportunity and those that lack thereof, or agency, or anything around those topics. So I guess it's always just still surprising to me, and I'm like, how can we do better going forward, so that like I don't have to have conversations with people who are 30, 35, 41, not for the first time, about privilege, and why they have privilege. And then have to have the conversation with like, oh, I don't have privilege. Like I grew up poor. Okay, well, that doesn't mean you have privilege. Like you still have so many privileges because you're white, because you're a man, because any of this, like just because you feel as if they're like you are a blue collar white man, doesn't mean that you don't have too many other outward privilege. Like, so yes, it's having those conversations I always grapple with, like, why is this the first time ever and where did that happen that this is the first time we're having the conversation? That's what that kind of triggered for me.
Or even think about the students like that are coming here, and like challenges, like Sherry said, like how this stuff has like transitioned and moved as our lives have progressed. Like some of our students have never ever even been in classrooms with people of color, and what that looks like from that student's perspective, like trying to navigate that space and not offend people, but also understand. And there's this other, side of the spectrum of like wanting to like really truly understand, being aware, wanting to be educated on it, and so that you can be an ally, in breaking down these barriers that people of color face. I commend you on what you've done with your son and what you're hoping to do with Robin, because I think that for so long that we keep having these conversations, and I think that this is also what frustrates me, because I'm tired of having conversations. Like, can't we just do the fucking work? Let's be change agents, but you also don't want to force people to change. I don't know, I just wrestle with that all the time. Like I think about like my own experience. I can't, every time we have these conversations, I have to think about my own life, because this is who I am. And it's like one of my friends, like my best friend in high school, she was she identified as female, she was a white girl. I used to go to her house, I'd stay the night, my mom, her mom were very good friends, everything. But she also had those conversations with her daughter and her sisters about privilege and power, and what it would look like because she would be driving before, like I got a car too, but if she was driving the car and I was a black man in the car with her, what that would look like. So we had those conversations, but all together. It wasn't even just, I'm having this conversation with my daughter, in my household. She's like, oh, when Kate comes over, we're gonna all have this conversation and talk about what that looks like and how you guys can be, change agents, if you do get stopped, how you can support him, whatever. So I think it does start there, like really instilling that into your children as they grow, because that's, that's what we learn first is from our, individual households. That's where we get our first information before we're exposed to like the internet and our peers and the bad things that society has in store for us.
I think also bringing it back to the classroom and this idea of exhaustion, and just when we get exhausted, we get defensive, we get cranky, we get all of these things. And I think just having an awareness that some of these students that are coming in are so exhausted at this point, and how can we support the exhaustion and acknowledge it in a way that allows them to feel those raw emotions that come with exhaustion and the kind of quickness that comes with exhaustion. yeah, I think that needs to be a consideration of how to proactively enter conversations and experiences in classrooms with the idea that, you know, I think of the Women's March sign that was like, I can't believe I'm still protesting
doing this,
shit.
yeah.
And I'm just like, yeah, I cannot believe I still have to explain that just because I'm a woman does not mean that I'm going to be dainty and quiet. I'm a very loud, very direct human, and that is not received well by anyone, really. I mean, nobody likes a direct woman. Not even women. Women don't like direct women.
No,
White women don't like direct white
they
women.
don't.
Nobody likes this thing.
Yeah. White women are very unsupportive of other white women.
Yeah.
It's true.
I mean,
like,
all people are very supportive of all
Yeah.
people, I think, when it comes down to
they're out to get you.
there's not like, you know, there's just everybody's discriminatory against everybody these days.
Right.
There's just no solidarity
Right.
anymore. It's so divisive that you can't even like somebody that identifies exactly like you.
Yeah.
Like two white women with short haircuts and
Glasses.
opinions and glasses, and we just will rip each other apart for all of the things that we exhibit. Well, we won't.
Do you want to fight now?
Dance off.
Is this a fight?
I only do dance offs. I don't fight.
That's right.
Yeah. But when you said you were tired, I just thought, yeah, the exhaustion.
Yeah,
I think we need to be more mindful of the exhaustion.
I
think
thought
that's
about
good.
that T-shirt and
Yeah.
that you know, all the different things that those students were thinking about. Like, I was just like, wow, like that was powerful because it gave them like a different lens to look at. You know, when they're like, oh, this is what, you know, people think about this race of people, and I don't know. I think that a lot of the time, like, people are aware, and then there are people who are not aware. But I think about like just this morning, like just when I woke up and I now seeing that shirt and all those different things that these students have said, you know, this is what, you know, people are saying about this race. And how exhausting that it really truly is. It's taxing, but to wake up every day and have that on your shoulders, like that weight to carry, you know, I'm black, I'm a black man, I'm a black gay man, you know, and walking down these streets of like, just at any given moment, something could happen. And I mean, this could happen to anyone, but just like, damn, like, that weight is so heavy, you know, thinking that we're ghetto or that we're Steelers or that, you know, we're going to do something ignorant. That's a lot because you want people to see you for your authentic self, like being compassionate, being, you know, educated, being smart, you know, whatever these things are. Like, first, I'm a human being, you know, without the color. Like, I'm a human.
So thank you. I think we're at our time. We're a little beyond our time. This is a good conversation. Thanks for
doing
Thank
this.
you.
Yeah. We've got,
Thank you for coming.
we've got one more real talk,
Yeah.
and then Veronica is still working on pulling together a culminating event, which will be towards the end of the spring quarter. Just another quick plug for Dr. Yancey.
Yeah, tomorrow.
So let's go next to
Go
the
New College
Barry,
Building.
can you go back one?
Sure.
What was I think I have it on there, the 7th, right?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I have it on my calendar, thank you. Yeah, I do, and then we don't have the last date yet.
I don't have the last date yet. I'm really hoping to have it locked in soon. Again, if you go to the Tuesday topics page, you can view, if you go to the event for the American Be Real Talk, you can click out to watch the whole series. Yeah.
And I think that goes like with like scheduling, and I was in a meeting where we were talking about like how like things that are happening on main campus is not being translated down here. Like it just needs to be like more streamlined of like communication so that we don't have like I have an event tomorrow at the exact same time, a Black History Month thing on main campus at the same time as this.
There's another event that Tiffany Montgomery, who is one of our postdocs, is leading in this room on Thursday from 12 to 1 about African American nursing, which if you can, she's got a number of folks that are